Welcome to Dark Hub. Tonight, we travel to a place where history, myth, and nightmare are one. A land of foggy mountains, ancient forests, and castles that whisper with the voices of the dead. A place where the border between life and death was never clear. This is Transylvania, the land of vampires. For centuries, the name itself carried fear. It echoed in stories across Europe and beyond. A cursed land where blood was spilled not only in battle, but in ritual, where rulers turned cruelty into legend, where noble women bathed in blood to remain young forever, and where ordinary villagers feared every shadow, believing that the dead could rise and drink the life of the living. Tonight, for 1 hour, we will step into the shadows of Transylvania. We will uncover the truth behind Vlad the Impaler, the man who became Dracula. We will enter the halls of Elizabeth Bathory, the Bloody Countess. We will listen to the whispers of peasants who fought unseen creatures at night. And we will ask a question that has haunted humanity for centuries. What if the legends are not legends? What if vampires were real? He was born in 1431 in the fortress of Sigishora, in the heart of Transylvania. His name was Vlad III, son of Vlad Dracula, a nobleman who belonged to the Order of the Dragon, a knightly order sworn to defend Christianity. From his father, he inherited a name. From his homeland, he inherited a curse. Vlad would later become known as Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, and in history, no ruler would be more feared. From his youth, Vlad was surrounded by violence. He was taken hostage by the Ottoman Empire, forced to witness torture, cruelty, and death. But instead of breaking him, it shaped him. It made him a man who believed that fear was stronger than any army. When he returned to rule Wallachia, Vlad used terror as his weapon. He did not simply kill his enemies. He displayed them. On the hills outside his castle, forests of stakes rose into the sky. Atop each stake, the body of an enemy. Thieves, traitors, soldiers, thousands of corpses lined the roads, rotting in the sun, their eyes eaten by crows. Travelers wrote of the horror. One German merchant described riding through a valley of death, where the stench of blood and decay made breathing impossible. And in the middle of it all, Vlad dined calmly, drinking wine as if surrounded by nothing unusual. Legends spread that Vlad did not only enjoy watching death, but that he also drank blood. Some chronicles describe him dipping bread into the blood of his victims. Others claim he drank from goblets, believing that blood gave him strength. Whether these stories are true or exaggerated, they created a legend that would one day transform into something greater, the myth of Dracula. But even without fiction, Vlad was a monster of flesh and blood. His cruelty was not hidden in shadows. It stood in daylight, impaled for all to see. It is no wonder that when Bram Stoker searched for inspiration for his 1897 novel, he found it in the terrifying figure of Vlad the Impaler, the man who turned cruelty into legend, the man whose shadow still haunts Transylvania. In the heart of the Carpathian Mountains stands a fortress. Its towers rise like fangs against the night sky. Its walls are dark, its halls cold. This is Bran Castle, known across the world as Dracula's Castle. Tourists today walk through its corridors whispering about vampires. They take photos by torchlight, their flashes bouncing off stone walls. But centuries ago, those same walls echoed with footsteps of soldiers, nobles, and prisoners. And the truth of Bran Castle is stranger than the myth. Contrary to legend, there is little evidence that Vlad the Impaler ever lived here. Perhaps he passed through, perhaps he visited once as a prisoner. But still, the legend of Bran grew. Why? Because the castle itself feels alive. Its stairways twist in strange directions. Its rooms are hidden, narrow, claustrophobic. One passage leads not to safety, but to darkness, a secret stair built inside the walls. Locals whispered that the castle was cursed, that its foundations rested on ancient, unholy ground. And as the centuries passed, the castle became the perfect stage for stories. In the late 19th century, when Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, he described a fortress in the mountains of Transylvania, a place where a vampire lord could rule in shadow. Though Stoker never visited Romania, the imagery matched Bran so well that the world embraced it. It became the symbol of Dracula's power. But behind the tourist legend lies something darker. Visitors have reported strange experiences, sudden chills in certain chambers, the feeling of being watched, whispers when no one else was present. One Romanian historian once wrote, "Every castle has a soul, but Bran's soul is not human." Some claim that prisoners died here in ways too cruel to imagine, that the stones themselves are soaked in centuries of blood, and even if Vlad did not call Bran home, the energy of death, power, and fear still lingers. Today, Bran Castle is the most visited place in Romania. Tourists come seeking Dracula, but many leave with more questions than answers. Was it truly just a fortress? Or a gateway between myth and reality? The walls remain silent. But in Transylvania, silence often hides the loudest truths. Welcome to Dark Hub. Tonight, we open the coffin of history and uncover a curse that has haunted humanity for centuries. The curse of blood. For 1 hour, we will travel through forgotten castles, dark villages, and modern cities, searching for the truth behind the world's most terrifying legend: vampires. Not far away in Hungary lived Countess Elizabeth Bathory. They called him Vlad the Impaler. In the 15th century, in the land of Wallachia, he ruled with terror. He impaled thousands of enemies on wooden stakes, leaving their bodies to rot in the sun. Some said he drank the blood of the dead to show his power. This man became the inspiration for Dracula. But he was no myth. He was real. Not far away in Hungary lived Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Noble, beautiful, and feared. She believed that bathing in the blood of young girls would keep her young forever. Servants brought victims to her castle. Their screams echoed through stone halls. Elizabeth Bathory murdered more than 600 girls. They called her the Bloody Countess. She was history's most prolific female killer, and she bathed in crimson. History's vampires did not hide in shadows. They lived in castles, they ruled kingdoms, and they turned blood into power. But vampires are older than castles. Centuries before Dracula, villages across Eastern Europe whispered about the dead who refused to stay buried. They called them upir, corpses dug from the ground, pale and swollen, blood at the corners of their mouths. In Serbia, entire communities panicked when strange deaths swept through villages. They dug up bodies and drove stakes through their hearts. Soldiers of the Austrian army even documented these hunts. This was not fantasy. It was real hysteria. In the Carpathian Mountains, people left garlic at their windows, crosses at their doors. They feared the night. They feared the graveyard. And above all, they feared what walked when the sun went down. For peasants, vampires were not a story. They were a daily threat. And their fear shaped centuries of belief. Not all vampires belong to the past. Some lived in our time. In the 1990s, in Kentucky, a teenager named Rod Farrell claimed to be a vampire king. He led a cult of young followers. They drank blood in rituals. In 1996, Rod murdered the parents of his girlfriend, beating them to death with a crowbar. He was only 16 years old. In California, the world met Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento. In the late 1970s, Chase killed 6 people. He drank their blood, ate parts of their bodies, and believed he needed blood to survive. He was not a monster from legend. He was a man, but his thirst was real. And even today, there are vampire communities. Clubs in New Orleans, New York, and London where people drink blood in secret rituals. They do not hide their identity. They call themselves living vampires. So maybe the legend never died. It just adapted to modern times. Science has tried to explain the vampire curse. Some doctors say it was porphyria, a disease that makes the skin burn in sunlight and lips turn red from blood damage. Others say it was tuberculosis. Corpses looked pale with blood at the mouth. And some believe it was madness, a condition called Renfield syndrome, where people crave blood. But what science cannot explain is the persistence of the myth. Why every culture, from Europe to Asia to the Americas, has its own vampire stories. Why across centuries humans always fear creatures of the night. Perhaps vampires were never supernatural. Perhaps they were human monsters hiding behind myth. Or perhaps the myth was built on something that once was real. For centuries, we've told stories of vampires. Legends of immortality, tales of beauty, horror, and blood. Some were rulers who turned murder into power. Some were killers who believed they needed blood to live. And some may still walk among us, hidden in plain sight. Vampires may not rise from graves, but the thirst for blood, the hunger for power, the dream of immortality still lives. Perhaps the real curse of the vampire is not in the legend. It is in us. This is Dark Hub. Not far from Transylvania, across the border into Hungary, another legend was born. If Vlad the Impaler was remembered for cruelty in war, she was remembered for cruelty in silence. Her name was Elizabeth Bathory. History calls her the Bloody Countess. Born in 1560 into one of the most powerful families of Hungary, Elizabeth had everything: wealth, beauty, and influence. But behind the walls of her castle, something monstrous grew. Servants whispered of strange punishments. Girls from nearby villages were brought to the castle as maids, but many were never seen again. At first, people dismissed the rumors. Nobility was untouchable. But soon, the truth could not be ignored. Elizabeth believed that blood could give her eternal youth. According to witnesses, when a young servant girl once cut her hand and her blood fell on Elizabeth's skin, the Countess swore it made her flesh feel younger. From that day forward, she demanded blood. Victims were locked in chambers beneath the castle. Some were beaten, some burned with hot irons, some starved. And many were drained of blood, their bodies discarded like broken dolls. Historians estimate that Elizabeth Bathory may have killed more than 600 girls, 600 lives stolen for vanity, 600 screams swallowed by stone walls. She bathed in their blood. She believed it gave her beauty, and when she looked in the mirror, she smiled. Eventually, the rumors reached the Hungarian king. Investigators entered the castle. What they found was worse than nightmare. Dead girls hidden in walls, bodies buried in shallow graves, testimonies of torture that shocked even hardened soldiers. Elizabeth Bathory was arrested in 1610, but she was never executed. Her noble blood protected her. Instead, she was sealed inside her own castle, bricked into her chambers with only a slit left open for food. For 4 years, she lived in darkness, alone with her memories, until in 1614 the Bloody Countess died. But her legend did not. Even today, her castle, Chaktic Castle in Slovakia, is said to be haunted. Visitors report seeing a woman in a red dress walking the ruins at night. Others claim to hear screams echoing in the stones. Elizabeth Bathory remains one of the most infamous women in history. A vampire not of myth, but of flesh. She did not rise from a grave. She created one. Vampires are not only creatures of the past. Some lived in our own time, and their crimes were far darker than any legend. In the 1990s in Kentucky, a teenager named Rod Farrell created a cult called the Vampire Clan. He believed he was a vampire king, hundreds of years old. His followers drank blood in rituals, cutting themselves and sharing wounds. But fantasy soon turned to horror. In 1996, Rod and his clan broke into the home of his girlfriend's parents. Armed with a crowbar, he beat them to death. When police arrested him, Rod declared, "I am immortal. I am a vampire." In California in the 1970s, another man became infamous. His name was Richard Chase, the Vampire of Sacramento. Chase murdered 6 people. He drank their blood and ate parts of their bodies. He believed that if he did not consume blood, he would die. The newspapers called him a monster. But Richard Chase was no legend. He was human, and that made him far more terrifying. Even today, there are people who call themselves vampires. In cities like New Orleans, New York, and London, communities of living vampires gather in secret. They drink small amounts of human blood as part of rituals, claiming it gives them energy, life, or connection. For them, it is not horror. It is identity. But for the world outside, it is a reminder that the vampire myth is not only history, it still walks among us. Science has tried to explain the vampire myth. Doctors point to diseases. Porphyria, a rare blood condition that makes skin burn in sunlight and gums recede, exposing the teeth. Tuberculosis, corpses look pale, thin, with blood at the corners of their mouths. Rabies, victims feared water, avoided sunlight, and became aggressive, even biting. And psychology offers its own explanation. There is something called Renfield syndrome, an obsession with blood. Those who suffer from it crave to drink blood, believing it gives them life. Science can explain pieces of the puzzle, but it cannot explain everything. Why do vampire myths exist in so many cultures? From Europe to Asia, from Africa to the Americas, every people has stories of blood drinkers, of the dead returning to haunt the living. Coincidence? Or memory? Some historians believe that the vampire myth was born from fear. Fear of death, disease, and the unknown. But others whisper a darker possibility. That somewhere in some forgotten corner of the world, such creatures did exist. And their shadow still lingers. Transylvania remains the heart of the legend. Its castles still stand. Its forests still whisper. And even today, travelers say they feel eyes watching them from the dark. Perhaps vampires do not rise from graves, but the thirst for blood, the hunger for power, the dream of immortality still lives in us. And that is the real curse of Transylvania. This is Dark Hub. If you made it this far, you have walked with us through blood, shadow, and legend. But there are more secrets, more horrors, more forbidden truths waiting in the dark. Subscribe to Dark Hub, because the next story may be darker than this one. And remember, in the shadows we are never truly alone.